Hello, welcome to my home. I've heard that you've traveled from a very, very, very far away place. And I've also heard that you've also perhaps come from a different time. Well, welcome to my home. I'm glad that you made it here. I was getting ready to make some food and have my lunch with my family, but since you're here, I wanted to share a story with you and tell you about the great things that God has done in my life. Do you remember a few years ago when there was that terrible drought? When it hadn't rained for 3 years? Well, I certainly remember it. It was terrible. My garden was dry and there was no more food to be found at the markets or any of the shops here in Sidon, the town that I live in. And things were getting really desperate. I didn't know what to do anymore, and my son was young and I was alone, and I was so scared. I was worried that we would not have anything to eat and that ultimately we would die. And one day, it came to that. I had a small bowl of flour, about this much, and my normally full jug of oil had just a few drops left in it. I realized that without food, my son and I would both die, so I decided to do a very terrible and difficult thing. I said to myself, I'm going to bake the last bit of flour, the last few drops of oil, eat it, and we would just go to sleep and see what would happen to us. But I didn't think that we would last much longer. But then something happened. I went outside to get some things from my storage place, the shed, the small shack I have outside of my home, and I heard a man's voice. He asked me for some water. I looked at him and I asked him what his name was, and he told me his name was Elijah. Elijah. The name sounded very familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. So I asked him if I could help him with anything, and he said that he wanted some water. Water in a drought? How was I going to get him water? But then I remembered that I had one last jug with just a little bit of water left in it. So I gave him some of the water to drink, to quench his thirst, because he'd obviously been traveling from somewhere far away. After he drank the water, he said to me, "Give me some bread to eat." Bread to eat? Where was I supposed to give him bread from? I barely had anything for myself. I told him that I had nothing baked, but I only had a little bit of flour and a few drops of oil. And do you know what that man said to me? This Elijah? He asked me to give the rest to him. When I looked at him, my eyes full of shock and disbelief, he kept asking. He said, "Give me the rest of the flour and the oil." I decided to do just that. But he promised me that I would not run out of flour or oil. Well, I guess we had to see. So I mixed up the last bit of flour with the oil, put a few drops of water, mixed it into a dough, put it in my oven that I had started the fire in, and gave him that small flatbread to eat. Elijah, after he ate it in a few bites, he must have been so hungry, told me that if I had faith, God would take care of me. In a drought, in a famine, with no flour, with no oil, with nothing else to eat, well, there was nothing else for me to do, so I decided that it was either die or have faith and see what would happen. Friends, do you know what happened? For days, for weeks, for months, I kept pouring from this small jug and taking flour from my small vessel where I kept it all in, and I would make a loaf of bread every day for my son and I to eat, and for Elijah as well. He ended up staying with us for quite some time. And do you know what happened? The flour never went down. The oil never ran out. God provided for us. I learned such a valuable lesson that from the little that I had, I needed to give to those that had nothing, like Elijah. But I also learned that God would provide for all of my needs, even when it seemed impossible. Well, today, I have more than just a little bit of oil and a little bit of flour and water, of course. I have far more than that. I have bread and I have fresh fruits and vegetables in my garden. God has blessed me. It was not an easy time. After the drought ended and the rain fell down from heaven, the oil started to run out and the flour ran out too. But then God performed an even greater miracle in my life. But, my friends, you will have to come next week so I can tell you the story. God brought somebody back to life from the dead, and that is something that I will never, ever forget. Well, I suppose until next time, I have to run off and go make some sandwiches for my son. It's lunchtime and we have to eat together. Well, good luck on the rest of your journey, and please stop by next time. I'll have something else for you. All right, farewell, take care. All right, friends, really quickly, I just wanted to share the recipe for the bread that I first made when Elijah came to visit me. I now call this bread Elijah's bread, and I wanted to share the recipe with you so that perhaps you can make it at home as well. It is very simple, but very delicious. All right, here we go. So you take 1 small measure of flour, you have a little bit of water, and a little bit of oil. The way that I did it was by making a small little pit in the middle of the flour and pouring most of the oil. Back then, when I would pour the oil in, there would be more oil in the next day. Now the oil will run out, but that's not a problem because God always provides. So I mix the flour in with the oil just like this with my hands, and then add some water drop by drop. You keep mixing until it forms a nice dough or paste. So obviously it's sticking to my fingers, but that's okay. We can wipe them off. You keep mixing. I have to get both hands in here. You want to make sure that there aren't any or that many clumps of dry flour. If you want to add anything else to it, like salt or perhaps some fresh herbs from your garden, you can also do that. And this much flour will make 1 small flatbread. I will show you in just one moment. So then I take it in my hand, try to peel some of the flour off of my fingers, form it into a ball. Let's see, let's try to do this. Like so. And then you'll form it into a flatbread. And it doesn't have to be perfect. All right. So you make 1 flatbread like this. And you can make it thicker or thinner depending on what you want. There's no wrong or right way to make it. All right. So it will look something like this. You'll have your oven already hot and ready for the bread. Put it on a baking stone and bake it for a few minutes, checking to make sure that it's done and ready to take out. You don't want the edges to be burnt or black. All right, so that's pretty much it. I hope that you try this recipe at home and let me know if you enjoy it. All right, Shabbat Shalom. See you next week.